I'm responding to the question that actually many and a growing number are having today, and that is, how do we know Jesus Christ ever lived? How do we know that Jesus walked in time-space history, that he was a figure of human history? When I respond to this, I like to give reasons. I like to give categories. And in this context, I would give categories of responses. For example, I have said in print before that depending on how far you want to go after 30-ish AD, the crucifixion, we have many secular sources for Jesus. Okay? How many? And over how long a period of time? If you only want to go 100 years, in other words, approximately 30 AD to 130 AD, you would have more than a dozen sources. Now, I should clarify. I'm talking about non-New Testament sources, non-New Testament. If you want to go as far as, let's say, 150 years, 30-ish AD to 180 AD, and that's pretty fair for ancient historical synopses of history. I've argued that there are about 18 sources during that time, which if you only look at the non-Christian sources, Greek, Roman, Syrian, Jewish, you would learn about 60 things. So that would be about 6 aspects of Jesus' life, teachings, death, even his resurrection, or at least a belief in his resurrection, and some of the aspects of the earliest church. We would know about 60 things from that period and those details. Now, that's if you want to do non-Christian sources or outside the New Testament. We also have a category of Christian sources. We could do Christian sources outside the New Testament. Now, some of these would be real early ones. Clement of Rome, writing about 95 AD. Ignatius, writing about 107 AD. We have Polycarp writing about 110 AD, and Papias, whose work unfortunately has been lost, but his fragments are dated between 110 and 125. Now, these Christian sources, 95 AD to about 125 AD, that's a maximum of 25 years after what some say is the close of the New Testament canon, at about 100 AD. So just 25 years later, that's very early. And someone could say, yeah, they're Christian sources though. All right, the previous category, they wouldn't be able to say that. Now, a third category is archaeological data. Now, archaeology doesn't confirm the New Testament as strongly as it confirms the Old Testament, but there's still some things that help us with Jesus. What do you do with some of these topics are controversial, but what do you do with the possible bone box, the ossuary, the reburial box of James that says on the burial box, James, the brother of Jesus, the son of Joseph, brother of Jesus? What do you do with James's burial box? If this burial box, like bone boxes, we're getting to the end of the period here. And if James is buried in the 60s AD and Jesus is his brother, he's got to live close to that same time. And James is from Jerusalem.
Hey, it's good to see you here on Apologia Center. This is a ministry that's there to provide you, the viewer, with content that's going to be informative for you, that you can learn from and apply into your life as you develop your worldview formation as a Christian. If you're not a Christian, you're more than welcome to be on this channel and maybe be challenged by some of the claims of Christianity and challenge us with your claims in a friendly, respectful way. I think this is a channel like no other on YouTube, frankly, because of the community we've developed. So if you want to be a part of this community, go ahead and hit the like button. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel. If you aren't subscribed, join us on Discord and jump onto our Patreon and just be a part of the community.
That's important. There is a decree called the Nazareth Decree, which found around Nazareth from about 140 to 150 AD, that says anybody guilty of grave robbing will be punished by death by edict of the Roman emperor. So it's secular, non-Christian, But why is this edict saying you'll be punished by death when in other parts of the Roman Empire it was not a capital offense? But why in Palestine? Maybe because Tacitus says that after Jesus died by crucifixion at the hands of Pilate during the reign of Tiberius Caesar, he says this pernicious superstition broke out again. And so maybe the Romans didn't like the idea that this Christian teaching was getting started, and so they put a death penalty on it. One thing that's interesting about the Nazareth decree is that in Matthew chapter 28, when they buried Jesus, they say they sealed the tomb. And the Nazareth decree, Roman source, the Nazareth decree says people guilty of breaking seals and opening tombs. Breaking seals and opening tombs. It's a reference to seals on the tomb. And that's a backup of the Matthew 28 reference, is the only reference to that in the New Testament. But a lot of people misunderstand this last point. But let me give you a fourth category. We talk about non-Christian sources outside the New Testament, archaeology. Fourthly, the New Testament. Now, a lot of mythicists, as they're being called, who think Jesus didn't live, they throw up their hands at this point. Well, that's a Christian source. I'm not going to allow anything for the New Testament. If they respond like that, they don't understand where skeptical scholars are today. Because if you cite the skeptical, unbelieving, agnostic scholars like Gazer Bermesh, Bart Ehrman, Casey, or James Crossley, you cite people like this, Morris Casey. If you cite people like that, they're going to cite the New Testament. If you don't, they're going to use the New Testament. Why? Because even critics, and those folks are agnostics anyway, they're not Christians, they will only cite New Testament portions that are evidenced. We know something about it. For example, Homer's Iliad may not be a very good historical source, but maybe there's 10 facts that all historians think is an historical fact in Homer's Iliad. Then there's nothing wrong quoting Homer to cite Homer if you have outside data for that. The best evidence for the historical Jesus is in the New Testament. And we have what are called New Testament creeds, which even Bart Ehrman, the agnostic or atheist, he goes back and forth between those names for himself, but definitely not a Christian. He dates these creeds to 30 to 32 AD. 30 to 32 AD, that's very early. And the main one, the best known one, is 1 Corinthians 15:3, and following the death, burial, resurrection of Jesus, what Christians call the gospel. In fact, it calls him Christ there, not Jesus. And Bart Ehrman says these creeds are 30 to 32 AD. And he says, Paul got this material from eyewitnesses. Paul received it from eyewitnesses. The skeptical Jesus seminar will reject up to, depending on how you count the colors, the Jesus seminar reject up to 90% of the so-called red letter teachings of Jesus. When it comes to 1 Corinthians 15, he appeared to Peter. Red means it happened in the Jesus seminar coloration, and pink is that it probably happened. He appeared to Peter, pink, probably happened. He appeared to Paul in the same list, red, that we have eyewitness testimony. It's incredible. That's from the Jesus seminar. Bart Ehrman says Paul got it from the eyewitnesses. So if you want the best evidence for the historical Jesus, I'd say for sure you want to go with the New Testament. Now there's backup. When you use the New Testament, if somebody really objects, I'll go to Roman history. I'll go to other sources. And by the way, those sources go all the way back to about 50 AD. That the secular sources may actually probably predate the Gospels. So we just have a mix and match kind of thing. You want non-Christians? Here you go. You want Christians outside the New Testament? Here you go. Archaeology, which rocks don't have beliefs. So that's pretty good. But the best evidence are the reports of the New Testament that, as Bart Ehrman says, they're good because they're very early, and Paul got them from the eyewitnesses himself. Bart Ehrman asks, where do we get closer to the eyewitnesses than right here?